Masturbation and sex may appear similar on the surface because both lead to sexual pleasure and orgasm, but inside the brain they are processed in fundamentally different ways. The distinction is not just about physical stimulation, it is about how the brain interprets reward, connection, safety, novelty, effort, and emotional meaning. Understanding these differences helps explain why masturbation and sex affect motivation, bonding, satisfaction, mood, and even behavior in distinct ways. At the most basic level, both masturbation and sex activate the brain's reward system. This system is driven primarily by dopamine, a neurotransmitter associated with motivation, anticipation, and pleasure. Dopamine is released when the brain predicts a rewarding outcome, pushing us to repeat behaviors that feel good. During both masturbation and sex, dopamine rises as arousal builds and peaks around orgasm. However, the pattern, context, and consequences of dopamine release differ significantly between the two. When a person masturbates, the brain experiences a self-directed reward loop. The individual controls the timing, intensity, fantasy, and outcome. The brain quickly learns that pleasure can be obtained with minimal effort, minimal uncertainty, and no social risk. This predictability makes masturbation a highly efficient dopamine trigger. The brain likes efficiency, so it encodes masturbation as a fast, reliable way to regulate mood, relieve stress, or escape boredom. This efficiency is one reason masturbation can become habitual more easily than partnered sex. Sex, on the other hand, involves shared reward processing. Dopamine still plays a role, but it is layered with additional neurochemicals such as oxytocin, vasopressin, serotonin, and endorphins. These chemicals are associated with bonding, trust, emotional safety, and long-term attachment. Sex requires cooperation, communication, vulnerability, and responsiveness to another person's cues. Because of this, the brain treats sex not just as a pleasure event, but as a social and emotional experience. One of the most important differences between masturbation and sex lies in how the brain handles anticipation versus connection. Masturbation is heavily anticipation-driven. The pleasure comes largely from the build-up, fantasy, and expectation of release. The brain stays in a dopamine-dominant state, focused on the reward itself. After orgasm, dopamine levels drop rapidly, often followed by a brief emotional dip or sense of emptiness. This is why some people report feelings of guilt, sadness, or numbness after masturbating, especially if it was used to escape uncomfortable emotions. Sex tends to shift the brain from anticipation to integration. While dopamine initiates desire and pursuit, oxytocin rises during physical touch, eye contact, and emotional closeness. Oxytocin dampens the stress response and promotes feelings of safety and bonding. Instead of a sharp dopamine crash, sex often results in a more balanced neurochemical afterglow, marked by relaxation, closeness, and emotional satisfaction. This difference explains why sex is more likely to leave people feeling connected and grounded afterward, while masturbation may leave them feeling neutral or even depleted. Another key difference is how the brain processes novelty. Masturbation, especially when paired with fantasy or visual stimulation, allows the brain to rapidly switch stimuli. Novelty is a powerful dopamine trigger, and the brain becomes highly responsive to new images, scenarios, or ideas. Over time, the brain may start to associate arousal more strongly with novelty than with physical or emotional presence. This can increase the threshold needed to feel excitement, a process known as dopamine desensitization. Sex typically offers limited novelty but deeper complexity. The same partner may not provide endless new stimuli, but the experience evolves through emotional nuance, timing, mood, and mutual responsiveness. The brain learns to derive satisfaction not from constant novelty, but from familiarity, trust, and shared rhythm. This engages different neural networks related to empathy, emotional attunement, and long-term reward, rather than short-term stimulation alone. Effort is another crucial factor. Masturbation requires little effort or vulnerability. The brain learns that pleasure is available on demand, without negotiation or rejection. Sex requires emotional effort, communication, and sometimes discomfort. Paradoxically, effort increases reward value in the brain. When something requires investment, the brain assigns it greater meaning. This is why sex, even if less frequent, often feels more significant and memorable than masturbation. The brain also processes control differently in these two activities. Masturbation is entirely self-controlled. The individual dictates the pace, fantasy, and outcome, which can feel empowering in the moment. However, constant self-control trains the brain to associate arousal with isolation and autonomy. Sex requires shared control. The brain must adjust to another person's needs, responses, and boundaries. This shared control activates regions of the brain involved in social cognition and emotional regulation, reinforcing interpersonal skills and empathy. Stress regulation further separates the two experiences. Masturbation is often used as a short-term stress relief tool. It reduces cortisol temporarily and provides a calming effect through endorphins. However, because it does not resolve the underlying stressor, the relief is brief. Sex, when emotionally safe, can reduce baseline stress levels over time by strengthening social bonds, increasing oxytocin, and enhancing emotional security. The brain perceives sex as a form of co-regulation, whereas masturbation is self-regulation. The impact on motivation also differs. Frequent reliance on masturbation as a primary dopamine source can train the brain to prefer immediate rewards over delayed ones. This may subtly affect motivation, discipline, and tolerance for effort in other areas of life. Sex, because it is less immediate and more relational, does not typically produce the same effect. Instead, it reinforces patience, emotional investment, and delayed gratification. Memory formation is another area where the brain diverges. Masturbation experiences are often stored as isolated sensory memories, focused on physical sensations or fantasies. Sex creates multi-layered memories involving emotion, touch, smell, voice, and shared experience. These richer memories activate the hippocampus more deeply and contribute to long-term emotional bonding. Importantly, the brain does not label masturbation as bad and sex as good. Both are natural behaviors. The difference lies in frequency, context, and purpose. When masturbation is used occasionally, the brain integrates it without issue. When it becomes a primary emotional regulator or replaces relational intimacy, the brain adapts accordingly, prioritizing self-soothing over connection. Sexual meaning also differs neurologically. Sex often becomes tied to identity, desirability, and self-worth because it involves being chosen and accepted by another person. Masturbation rarely provides this external validation. As a result, sex can strengthen self-esteem through relational affirmation, while masturbation tends to be emotionally neutral unless paired with shame or guilt. Finally, the long-term brain impact depends on balance. A brain that experiences both solo and shared pleasure without reliance on either adapts flexibly. A brain that relies heavily on masturbation may become overstimulated but underconnected. A brain that experiences sex without emotional safety may associate intimacy with anxiety. The brain learns from patterns, not moral judgments. In conclusion, masturbation and sex activate overlapping but distinct neural pathways. Masturbation is dopamine efficient, self-directed, and anticipation-driven. Sex is chemically complex, socially embedded, and emotionally integrative. The brain responds to masturbation as a quick reward and to sex as a bonding experience. Understanding these differences allows individuals to make conscious choices about how they use pleasure, connection, and desire in their lives.